I'm Allison of DIY Salvation. I was once a member of the Church of Scientology, an auditor and a course supervisor. For reasons I laid out in another video on this channel, I left the church and now practice TROM. That stands for the resolution of the mind. It was developed by Dennis Stevens, a career Scientologist and friend of L. Ron Hubbard. TROM's original intent was to be integrated into Scientology, but Hubbard never got the chance to review the materials before he died. I'm not here today to persuade you to stop practicing Scientology and switch to TROM. If you want to be a Scientologist, that is your choice, and I respect that. I respect your decision to practice Scientology, despite my knowing that your indoctrination compels you to label what I do as squirrel and dismiss it. But you most likely don't know what TROM is, and if you do, it's also likely I know Scientology better than you know TROM. In fact, I know Scientology better than the average Scientologist does. And for that reason, I feel a moral obligation to you to inform you of the following danger to your religion. It's not an attack from CNN, a disaffected former executive, the FBI, IRS, or even the courts. It's your religion being undermined right at your Class 5 org, right in your course room, and in your HGCs. I'm not the first person to cite the survival rundown as out tech. Mike Rinder made a clever summary about it on his blog, noting that this level of the bridge is nowhere to be found in Tech Volume 3, and you won't be able to verify this as the red volumes are being phased out. While Mike Rinder was still a part of the church, being the responsible Scientologist he was, he pointed out the many flaws in the survival rundown and was told that you just have to trust COB, the chairman of the board, namely David Miscavige, by 4 separate staff members he brought his objections to. I guess that trust COB is now KSW point number 11. If you want to read Mike Rinder's angle on the survival rundown course, I've provided a link to it in this video's description. I have my own take on it, which I'll summarize by pointing out what I've spotted just by looking at the table of contents and lightly perusing the course pack. Most notably, the policy letter keeping Scientology working is missing from the pack. The omission alone is a violation of that policy letter. The Scientology student in me spotted that one right away. Then the course supervisor in me zeroed in on the entry, the instructor's code, so I flipped to that page. As I suspected, this is actually an adaptation of the course supervisor's code, just with a different name. But they put it in the section marked the role of a coach. I found this odd, as there is an actual reference called coaching that should be there instead. Course supervisors, instructors, or whatever you want to call the person in charge of a Scientology course room have a distinctly different role than a coach does, which is a student who is assigned to help another student with a drill. In other words, these are not the right instructions to be giving to someone in that role. There are 11 points listed on this page. The supervisor's code actually has 21 points. And of the 11 they decided to keep, a lot of it is rewritten. To keep this video from being too terribly long, I'll just stick to the 2 alterations that madden me the most. The first one is supposed to read, "The supervisor must never neglect an opportunity to direct a student to the actual source of Scientology data." Now that's a big deal, or I suppose maybe I should say was a big deal when I trained in a Scientology academy. Whenever anyone, the supervisor included, would say this is the way you should do it or any statement about Scientology technology, the response was always, show me the reference. It's an essential part of keeping Scientology working, and that sort of attitude was encouraged in Scientology training. Now when we look at the survival rundown course pack, that line reads, "The instructor should never neglect an opportunity to evaluate for a student about Scientology." It's not even remotely the same thing. Now instead of the student being encouraged to challenge every statement the instructor makes about Scientology technology, we have the instructor encouraged to enforce his own evaluations on him. If a course supervisor did that while I was training, he would immediately be removed from the academy or at the very least sent to cramming. But even then and there, we are talking about a course supervisor's evaluation of the tech, but here and now we are talking about encouraging students to enforce their evaluations of it on other students. This is outright baddie. You teach Scientology by quoting L. Ron Hubbard, not with your own evaluations. Point number 2 on this page says, the supervisor should invalidate a student's mistake ruthlessly. Notwithstanding that this is what the supervisor should be doing, not the coach, not another student, the instructions aren't even complete. The original point number 2 of the course supervisor's code reads, the supervisor should invalidate a student's mistake ruthlessly and use good ARC while doing it. That makes more sense, doesn't it? You point out errors with a vengeance, but you are always polite and professional while doing so. The survival rundown does not give the coach, who is not the same status of a supervisor, such advice. I can only imagine all of the arguments that are going on, and how upset students must be getting in a course room where students are encouraged to make evaluations for each other about Scientology, and the advice is to ruthlessly invalidate mistakes. They might as well fit the students with boxing gloves before they enter the course room. Lastly, the Scientology auditor in me zeroed in on the training drills section. These drills, 0 through 4, are known to just about any Scientologist who's been involved in academy training for more than a week. But one of them, TR0 Bull Bait, is missing from the course pack. That's right. Missing. Probably the very most important of the basic training drills, TR0 Bull Bait can be found along with all the others in a bulletin entitled Training Drills Remodernized. It's the drill where one student tries to push another's buttons by doing and saying distracting things while the other must sit still and do nothing, paying full attention to all of it. This drill is so important and so well known that there's even a great deal of non-Scientologists out there who know about it, just by virtue of the fact that Scientology critics have mentioned it in their books, their blogs, and their videos over and over. In itself, it sounds like a pretty cruel thing to do to another person, making them sit still while they are being insulted and distracted. But any Scientologist worth their salt knows that making the person in the chair feel bad is not the purpose of the drill. Not at all. When you are conducting Scientology auditing, whether professionally or students taking turns, you never know what might come up in a session. The person might start crying. They might touch a sensitive part of their life they can't confront, and may become hostile to you about inquiring about it. You can't lose your cool during such a session if you are an auditor. It is absolutely essential to effective auditing sessions that every auditor trained passes this drill, or you end up with auditors that may start fighting with their pre-clears, or just wimp out at the first sign of hostility. It takes some bravery to be an auditor, and this drill helps you to develop that. As a person receiving auditing, I would never permit someone to audit me if they never passed on this drill, TR0 Bull Bait. Scientology just isn't Scientology anymore without it. Like I said before, this is not a complete list of everything wrong with the Survival Rundown course pack. But it's enough that if I were still a course supervisor, and this course pack came across my desk, as I would leave the org never to return, on my way out I would tell my students to ask for a refund, as they paid for standard Scientology, and they are most certainly aren't going to get it here. David Miscavige and his staff came up with this course, not L. Ron Hubbard. It's not a streamline of Hubbard's works. It's not some revision that needed to be made in order for Scientology to be more effective. It's squirreled LRH plain and simple, and it makes Scientology less effective. But let's look at the other side of this for a moment. L. Ron Hubbard is dead. David Miscavige, for all intents and purposes, now owns Scientology and, strictly speaking, can do whatever he wants with it. He can rewrite the books and courses. He can restructure the organization. He could require Scientologists to now greet each other with a secret handshake if he wanted to. He could do all those things. It would just make more sense to me if he would at least have the decency to put his name on the books and courses so that members of the Church of Scientology would at least know whose tech they were practicing. Because it's no longer Ron's. It's David's. I'm Allison Tandry. We are DIY Salvation. Don't just use your mind. Resolve it.